You won't regret it. I promise. Subscribe. My daughter shouted, "Get out of my house." And the room turned into a stage where I no longer belonged on the cast list. I didn't move. The lamp by the sofa hummed. The ice in my water clicked as it shifted. I had been telling a story, something small, a memory of her mother laughing at a burnt pot roast, and now the memory hung in the air like smoke that had nowhere to go. What would you have done? Raised your voice? Begged? Thrown the glass and made sure it shattered? I did none of that. I set the sweating tumbler on the end table, so gently the coaster didn't even slide, pulled my coat from the back of the chair, and for the life of me couldn't remember how to put my left arm through the sleeve. She stood by the kitchen doorway. The under cabinet lights made a halo of her hair and a mask of her face. Her husband stayed back, a shadow behind her shoulder, a hand on the frame like a man refusing to enter a burning room. Isn't that how it goes? Men protect doorways instead of people. "Dad," she said, softer now. "Please." "Please what?" "Please disappear, but nicely. Please not tonight. Please stop being old in front of my friends and my life and my new granite countertops." I'm unfair. She never said those things. I said them in my head, rushing to fill the silence so the next blow wouldn't land so hard. I buttoned the coat wrong. When I noticed, I unbuttoned and did it again. I remember the feel of each disc of plastic, the way the thread scratched the holes. People like to pretend that disaster is sudden and loud. It's not. Disaster is a man who takes his time to button a coat correctly, because that's the only thing he can still control. "I'll go," I said. "Thank you," she whispered, and I hated the courtesy in her voice. As if I were a delivery man, she had overtipped for arriving at the wrong address. On the porch, I paused. The wood planks were ones I'd sanded and stained 2 summers ago, kneeling while my knees still had cartilage worth mentioning. The azaleas, my wife's azaleas, flamed in the dark, their blossoms wet satin with sprinkler mist. I thought I could smell her perfume, or maybe it was the jasmine from the neighbor's fence, but it made my throat close all the same. Behind me, the door clicked. No slam, just the careful click of a daughter who has decided not to be cruel openly. The night in Atlanta was thick, the sky bruised with city light. I walked. Where else was there to go? The sidewalk forced me past familiar things that now felt borrowed. The mailbox with a missing red flag, the oak that leaned like a tired grandfather, the trash cans that always tipped in a strong wind. You think I'm piling details on you, but tell me, how else do you exit a life except by counting the things you'd once have fixed without being asked? I reached the end of the street, and for the first time in hours, I breathed. Would you have turned back, knocked to demand an apology? I could have. I still had the power of a father. But fathers who demand obedience from grown children are like retired bosses showing up on Mondays, ridiculous and a little sad. I kept walking. Peachtree was a river of headlights. The night clerks in their little aquariums of glass. The buses sighing. The couples leaning too hard into each other like they were borrowing balance. Somewhere a saxophone practiced scales poorly. I followed the sound and didn't find it. That's another thing about city nights. You hear the lives you can't reach. I didn't call anyone. Who would I have called? My bowling friend, Curtis? He would have said, "Damn," and then told me about his knee surgery. My younger brother, a stranger I shared DNA with. It's been years. My wife would have known what to say, but she's been dead long enough that the pity of it has worn thin for other people and become just the fact of me. 17 years. Long enough for our daughter to forget that I'm more than what I can carry up her steps. At the corner, a diner I knew well gave off its reliable acid smell of coffee and griddle. I went in. I ordered toast I didn't want. And while the waitress slid a greasy plate in front of me, my daughter's words, "Get out of my house," played again. But this time, I heard what I'd missed. The tremor. Not hate, fear, not of me, of needing me. Do you hear your own life wrong the first time, too? When I stepped back outside, my bones reminded me of the weather. I pulled the coat closer and took stock like a man checking pockets. Keys, wallet, phone, pride, depleted. Dignity, salvageable. If I made one right decision and kept it, I didn't go back. By morning, I had a room. A room is just 4 walls with a purpose. And this one's purpose was to reveal how loud a refrigerator can be when it's your only companion. The boarding house was off Boulevard, a broad-shouldered building with faded shutters and a front stoop that sagged like a face that had smiled too much. The landlady wore a pink sweatshirt with a glittery heart and kept calling me sir in the way people do when they want to remind you you're old without being sued for discrimination. The bed springs sang when I set my bag down. The window had a view of a parking lot where a solitary grocery cart dreamed of better fields. I told myself it was temporary. Isn't that what all kinds of exile are, temporary, until they're not? The room smelled of old paint and a lemon cleaner that masks, but does not forgive, the ghosts of previous tenants. A microwave sat like a patient square animal on the dresser. The shower curtain clung to me in the bath, as if it were starved for touch. I laughed at that. Imagine me at 70, embarrassed by a curtain's affection. I made a list because lists make men feel competent. Buy soap, a decent pillow, 3 hangers. I did not write, call your daughter. I did not write, cry. I did both anyway, but silently, like crimes I intended never to confess, except to you. What do you think? Does it help to admit the smallest of shamas, or do they breed in the light? At night, I lay on the thin mattress and replayed the living room. The bowl of oranges that were too shiny to be real. The framed photo of my wife, Grace, laughing into the lens 30 years younger and exactly the same. The way my daughter's husband had looked past me, toward the TV remote by his elbow, like he'd rather change the channel than the moment. This is where you want me to tell you why she said it. I could say I hovered. I did. I could say I corrected her child rearing. I did that too, sometimes with my mouth, often with my face. Maybe I cleaned a counter too often or stayed too late or told stories that had villains who wore masks that looked suspiciously like her husband. I've been a man who wanted to be needed more than he wanted to be himself. Do you forgive a man for that? Or is it the greater sin, because it forces everyone to carry you? Around midnight, someone down the hall coughed and then stopped. The silence dropped like a curtain, and I thought of my wife's azaleas again, wet and waiting, and of my daughter who must have gone to bed, probably with swollen eyes and the kind of pride that stings like salt on skin. She would think I had punished her by leaving without a fight. But the truth is simpler. I left because if I stayed, I'd have been a supplicant. And I promised myself, sometime between her birth and my first backache, that I would never make her kneel to me. I forgot to make the same promise to myself. I turned off the light. The refrigerator clicked. The old pipe sighed as if caught remembering. Sleep came in jagged pieces. I stitched it together as best I could. Atlanta became my witness. I granted it that role without asking its consent. I walked. What else could I afford that felt like progress? On Peachtree, the skyscrapers glittered like someone with too much jewelry and not enough taste. On Edgewood, I counted murals, fists raised. Birds mid-flight, a girl's face painted so large she could have swallowed me whole and I would have thanked her. At Piedmont Park, the lake reflected a sky that couldn't decide if it was blue or diluted milk. I sat on a bench and watched joggers who ran as if hurrying away from their future deaths. I envied them, not their knees, their destination. On the 3rd day, I bought a notebook from a drugstore. Do you know why? Because words that stay only in your head become bullies. If you don't pin them to paper, they circle and circle, and you'll mistake dizziness for thought. I wrote her name at the top, Lucy. Then I wrote, I love you enough to leave you alone. I tore it out. I wrote, you were cruel. I tore that out too. Shame looks uglier in ink. At a cafe off Edgewood, hard chair, local art, barista with a beanie, even though it was warm eye. Ordered a black coffee and forced myself to sit for 15 minutes without checking my phone. When had the phone become a rosary I fingered for comfort? I counted instead 10 people at tables, 1 baby, 2 laptops, a flyer advertising guitar lessons, a jar with a label that read tips not therapy, but the jar was empty, which told its own story. A man at the next table tuned a guitar. He looked maybe 40, beard, tired smile that said he'd once smiled. You play? He asked me when he saw me. Only records, I said. Records count, he said. What do you spin? I liked that he asked, and more, that he waited for an answer. Blues, I said. Muddy, BB, People who sound like they've chewed the same nail for 20 years and only just now got it out. He laughed. I play down on Edgewood at night sometimes. Tip hat and stubbornness. Stubbornness pays better, I said, and we both laughed like we agreed on something essential about the world. When I left, the barista said, "Have a good one, sir." And I wanted to correct her, tell her that I was not a sir except in emergencies and weddings. But I let her keep the title. Maybe I had earned it for surviving 3 days of silence without drowning in it. On the way back to my room, I passed a pawn shop. In the window, a trombone shone like the promise of getting the note right this time. I stood there until a teenager jostled past me and ran inside asking for a phone charger. I heard the metal bead curtain clack shut and felt like the shop had swallowed a small animal, the kind that keeps running even after it hits the glass. That evening, I did the only thing that makes sense when you have nothing to do. I cooked. The landlady let tenants use the kitchen if we cleaned up, and I cleaned before I began, because I was raised right or because I needed to. I chopped onions, and they made me cry with a nobility that grief rarely achieves. I pan-seared a thin steak, salted it beyond reason, added butter like a man who finally forgives himself one pleasure. The smell filled the hallway. A door opened. A man in a bathrobe peered out like a turtle. "Smells like when my wife was nice," he said, and withdrew. I ate standing up, a habit I couldn't break, as if one more minute sitting still would reveal something about me I couldn't handle. After, I washed the pan and watched the water foam cloudily and thought, maybe this is what starting over looks like. Suds retreating. A skillet still hot enough to burn you if you forget. I slept better that night. Not well, better. The city doesn't care if you find your footing. That's its mercy. That's its cruelty. At Piedmont Park, a weekday morning is a slow parade. Strollers, dog walkers with bags of warm secrets, retirees clocking their steps like they're nursing a small, odd faith. I found my bench again and claimed it, not with anything as aggressive as ownership, but with a man's weight that says I will be here long enough to finish this thought. "Lovely day," a woman said. She was my age, maybe a year older if we're being cruel, which I try not to be anymore. Her hair was short in a way that announced she'd cut it herself for decades and never once regretted it. "Lovely," I said. "Even the trash cans look hopeful." She laughed in an unpretty way I liked immediately. "I'm Bernice," she said. "You look like a man who either wants to talk or wants to be left the hell alone. I can do either." "You a mind reader, Bernice?" "No. I distribute options," she said, and sat at the far end of the bench as if respecting an invisible boundary. We watched a boy learn to ride a bike. The father, young, thin, scrolling a phone between runs, kept saying, "You got it. You got it," in a voice so casual it made the boy wobble harder, like praise delivered without attention is worse than none at all. Isn't that true? When someone tells you you're okay but doesn't look up, you are not okay. Bernice said, "You live near?" "For now," I said. "For now is an answer. Is it enough?" "Depends. You fleeing something or running toward?" "Don't know the difference at the moment." She nodded like I'd passed a test. "I make casseroles for people who forget to eat," she said. "I have a church ladies group that has very few ladies and even less church. You could join no doctrine, just recipes." Her eyes crinkled. "You look like you know your way around an onion," I laughed. "I can make a steak that'll convince your memories to be kind to you. Tempting. But my blood pressure prefers we become friends more slowly than that." We looked at the lake where a rowboat moved like someone trying to remember the word for grace. Bernice patted the bench. Twice. "Bring your own plate on Thursdays," she said, standing. "Paper offends Martha. Don't ask who Martha is until at least the second meeting." After she left, I stayed and listened to the city's breath. Do you do that? Just listen, as if maybe you'll catch it exhale your name. I pulled the notebook from my pocket and wrote, "There are 2 kinds of quiet punishment and peace. Today's is the second kind." By the time I reached the boarding house, the fridge no longer sounded like a confession. It sounded like a machine doing its job. I lay down for a nap and woke with the certainty that if my phone rang, I wouldn't answer on the first try. I would let it breathe. I would let myself choose. The phone didn't ring. Grief arrives at odd angles. I was making coffee when I remembered my wife dropping a carton of eggs in 1983 like a gambler losing one last dollar and laughing so hard she had to sit on the kitchen floor to breathe. I sat 237 years later on the linoleum of a borrowed kitchen and laughed with a sound that scared me because it was almost a sob and almost a bark and almost the sound a man makes when he realizes he has been carrying his dead for so long he's forgotten their faces. I made a list. Things I miss about Grace. Her crumbly cornbread. Her tendency to cry at commercials, but never at funerals. The way she'd press the back of her hand to my cheek to check my temperature as if I were permanently warmed by fever. Her anger, which kept me honest. Her gentle suspicion of the world, which meant joy always felt hard-won. And the azaleas, which she made me plant because flowers should rot where they are loved. Isn't that a sentence? I married a woman who understood both growth and decay in one breath. I wrote another list. Things that make me unbearable. My habit of correcting people's grammar when they're crying. My need to feel useful the way a cigarette needs fire, constantly and to its own detriment. My way of repeating a story because I like the sound of my voice in it. My refusal to let my daughter forget the good man I tried to be when she was small, as if achievements expire and I wanted to renew the license. You think harshly of me? Maybe you should. A man who wants to be necessary can become an anchor wrapped in velvet. The weight is there, even if the stroke is soft. At dusk, I went by my daughter's street by mistake. You see what I did there? I lied to myself so I wouldn't have to admit the truth to you. I went on purpose. I didn't plan to knock, but I wanted proof of her life continuing. Isn't that the worst? Knowing someone can go on without the part you thought you played? Her blinds were open. The living room lamp glowed. The azaleas stood like sentinels, red flags that refused to be lowered. I saw her silhouette, and the child's, my grandson, spinning with a towel as a cape. She lunged playfully to catch him, and he shrieked that half-fear, half-joy shriek that children do when chased by the person they trust. Something inside me loosened and tightened at the same time, like a jar lid finally giving way and spilling what you hadn't prepared to catch. Her husband crossed the room, took the towel, tied the cape properly. I can be generous, even now. He's not a bad man. He is a man made insecure by a father-in-law who loitered too long at the edges of his marriage. I see that now. I didn't then. Then I called him the banker in my head, as if a profession could explain a heart. They laughed. I stepped back from the window as if I'd been rude. I was. I walked to the corner and waited for no reason at all, like a dog who has run away, but not too far to hear his name if they call it. They didn't call. The sky went from rose to bruised plum. I went back to my room with the certainty that I had to make a life that did not lean against theirs like a man too tired to stand. Do you know when you're about to do one right thing? Your breath steadies. Your eyes stop scanning for exits. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and promised myself two things. I would stop looking through their windows, literal and otherwise. And I would forgive her the sentence she threw at me like a plate. She will regret it, I thought, and I will not collect that regret like a debt. I will let it sit in her, transform or rot as it needs to. That's love too. The part where you stop auditing. The man with the guitar, his name turned out to be Theo, waved me over when I entered the cafe 2 days later. I played down the street last night, he said. Made enough to buy rent and beans. Want to hear the story of the woman who said my song saved her Tuesday and then asked if I had spare change? I want to hear everything, I said, and meant it. Theo's fingers were chewing gum in human form, restless, stretchy, always moving. He smelled faintly of laundry detergent and cigarettes. I grew up in Macon, he told me. Came here because in Macon, if you say you're a musician, they say, "Ah, cute," and then they sign you up for a warehouse job. Here, they say, "Ah, cute," and then they buy you a beer. And which do you prefer? Beer. Always beer, he grinned. You live nearby? Nearby enough to be late and early to the same place. That's a lyric, he said. You write? Lists, I said. And apologies I don't send. Those are the best kind of poems. We talked about records until the sun shifted and the light in the window went from kind to interrogating. He invited me to a blues bar on Edgewood. It's sticky, he warned. The floor, the people, the songs. You get one on you, it stays. I'm overdue to be stained, I said, surprising myself. He grinned. Tonight, then. I told him I'd come and felt the small thrill of having a plan that did not revolve around someone else's needs. I bought a lemon square at the counter because it looked indecent. I ate half and wrapped the rest for later because I was raised in an economy of saving halves for later, even when later never arrives. Back at the room, I ironed a shirt for the first time in a long time. I did a poor job. The collar refused to lay flat, as if it were staging a protest I didn't authorize. I smiled at myself in the mirror anyway, because a man who's heading toward music shouldn't be scolded by his reflection. He should be blessed. Do you bless yourself? You should, even if it's clumsy, especially then. I left early to walk the long way. Edgewood at dusk is a melting pot, and nobody stirs. Bikes, scooters, couples with hands in each other's back pockets. The usual parade of preachers and hustlers, all of us selling something. I nodded at a man selling roses in plastic sleeves. He lifted one, and I shook my head. I got no one to bring it to, I said. He nodded back like he'd heard that sentence too many times to tally. Then bring it to yourself, he said, and I kept walking because sometimes good advice hurts your feet. The bar was dark enough to make everyone beautiful. The stage was a rug, the microphone duct taped to a stand that had been through 2 wars and a divorce. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with arms that could lift a car and a smile like a dare, nodded at me. First time? In this life? I said. She laughed. You want drink or forgiveness? Both. Whiskey for the drink, music for the other, she said, and slid the glass toward me. It burned like a second chance. Theo took the stage eventually. He wasn't the headliner. He wasn't the footnote. He was a man in the middle, which is where most of us live. His first song was about a woman who leaves a man for a city, and then the city leaves them both. It was better than that sentence makes it sound. Trust me, the room listened the way a good room does, with bodies, not faces. Heads leaned forward, elbows found tables, eyes went inward. I learned something that night I should have learned earlier. Sadness sung well is a form of joy. Isn't that backward? It isn't. Not when you see a stranger find the note they've been looking for and hold it long enough to be forgiven for not finding it sooner. A woman took the stool next to me halfway through the set. She wore a denim jacket with a rip in the shoulder that looked intentional. She smelled like oranges, the real fruit, not a lab's idea of it. You look like a man rehearsing an apology, she said. Always, I said, guilty or Catholic. Widower. She clinked her bottle against my glass with a gentleness that did not pity. I'm Nora, she said. Richard. She pointed at the stage. You know him? Met him in daylight, which is different. Everything is different in daylight, she said. I sell houses. I make people fall in love at noon and regret it at midnight. That's a power to be careful with. I am careless with lesser things, she said. Not that. We listened together. Our arms touched once when the crowd pressed. I did not flinch, and she did not apologize, and both of those felt like victories. When Theo finished, Nora said, Walk me out? The bouncers here are part-time poets. They dramatized the curb. We stepped into the night. The air had cooled enough to promise a different season someday. Nora said, You carry yourself like someone avoiding a particular house. You sell them. Do you also diagnose them? I diagnose people who think houses are sentences with periods at the end. Most of the time, they're commas. My daughter's house is an ellipsis, I said. Ouch. I deserved it. I lied, because I was trying out humility like a jacket I wasn't sure fit. She slid a card into my shirt pocket. In case you want to fall in love with a different kitchen, she said, then touched 2 fingers to her temple and was gone. I stood at the curb and found my hand touching the card as if it were a talisman. The night smelled like distant rain and closer French fries. Theo found me. You came, he said. I did, I said. Did it stick? It did, I said. I suspect I'll be scrubbing this floor from my shoes for days. Good, he said, and pulled me into a brief, hard hug that did not pretend we'd known each other longer than we had. Back at the room, I placed the card on the dresser and watched its white rectangle glow under the lamp. A new kitchen. Not in the literal sense. In the sense of a room where I could stand without apology. What would that look like? Smell like? Who would I be in it if not a man waiting to be assigned a task? The bowling alley smelled the same as 1995. Wax, rented shoes, cheap beer, ambition. Curtis called me out of the blue. Yes, I answered on the first ring, old habits, and said, "You dead?" "Apparently not," I said. "Then come down," he said. "League's full of has-beens and never-weres. You'll fit right in." I walked. It took me past places where I'd once measured my worth by usefulness. A hardware store where the same man still stands behind the counter, handing out screws like sacraments. A church whose sign always offers a pun so bad it feels like a dare to believe anyway. A barbershop where I have been called Big Man by 3 generations of men who never learned my name. Curtis was the same and not, which is the closest thing to a compliment a man our age can receive. He hugged me and smelled like cedar chips and menthol. "You look okay," he lied with love. "I bowl worse than I look," I said. "Not possible," he said, grinning. We rolled a few frames. My arm remembered the movement, then complained loudly about it. The ball wandered as if sightseeing. We talked about bad backs, good music, the part of life where the clerks look younger every year until one day you realize they always will. He asked about Lucy and the way men ask around it. "She said some things," I said. "They always do," he said. "We do too. Sometimes the same ones. If we're honest, do you ever think we raised our kids to think we were furniture? Useful till squeaky? No," he said. "Serious now. We raised them to think they were safe. And sometimes safe people make themselves scary to keep the feeling. They'll come back from it." When I left, my arm ached in a way that was almost pleasant. I had done something poorly and enjoyed it anyway. Isn't that a kind of freedom? Doing something badly, on purpose, and not apologize. Outside, a light rain had started, the kind that makes the street shine like a polished truth. I walked home smelling of rented shoes and friendship, which is better than perfume on some nights. My phone stayed silent. I placed it face down on the nightstand. Progress, if you'd like to count it. A week is both a breath and a century. On the 8th day, I woke certain the phone would ring. It didn't. I cleaned the room until the landlady asked if I was planning to leave her a tip or a mirror. I went to the cafe, where the barista said, "The usual?" And I felt a ridiculous swell of belonging at those 2 words. I walked to the park and found Bernice, who waved a Tupperware like a flag. "You missed Thursday," she said. Martha held forth on the evils of disposable forks and the moral superiority of butter over margarine. It was almost church. "I had an appointment with self-pity," I said. "Recurring?" she asked. "Less so." "Good," she said, and handed me the Tupperware. "Chicken tetrazzini. Don't argue. Take what you need and bring back the dish. Isn't that what we all do?" I said. "Not enough of us bring back the dish," she said, and tapped my wrist with a knuckle. I almost told her everything. The living room, the azaleas, the sentence. But there is a way grief can become a performance if you are not careful, and I did not trust myself to avoid applause. I took the Tupperware home, heated it, ate standing up, and cried over noodles like a fool. Then I laughed, because the noodles refused to offer an opinion about my tears, and that, too, was a mercy. Do you ever load a text thread and stare at the blinking cursor as if it's a heart monitor for a relationship? I typed, "I love you." I typed, "I'm not angry." I typed, "You hurt me." I erased each one because they asked for an answer, and I wanted to be the kind of man who could stand in silence without seeing it as a verdict. That night, the rain returned with more conviction, beating the roof like a drummer with unpaid rent. I slept hard for the first time since the sentence. Maybe fatigue is a blessing disguised as surrender. Maybe I finally trusted tomorrow to arrive without my supervision. The phone rang. My body woke before my mind did. My hand found the device. My thumb hovered. Would I answer on the first ring? The second? Would I let it roll past the third like a man flirting with danger? What would you have done? Don't lie. On the third ring, I answered. "Richard," I said, as if I were a receptionist for my own life. "Dad," she said, and my name reassembled inside her voice. I sat up. I didn't say anything. It's a trick you learn if you survive long enough. Silence creates a space where truth can land without breaking. She took a breath. Another. "I'm sorry," she said. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said it like that. I was angry. I was scared. I don't know. I say things when I don't know. I know, I said, softly. You learn from the best. She half laughed, half cried. I hate that you make me laugh when I'm trying to be serious. It's my only defense against your intelligence. Dad, the word broke. She sniffed. I miss you. I closed my eyes. I let the sentence find the part of me that still believed itself banished. I pictured the azaleas, wet. I pictured the boy with the towel cape. I pictured my own hands, which had always done more than they should, and less than they needed to. I hear you, I said. Can you come by? Not tonight, but soon. We want to talk. We can talk, I said. But listen to me first. Okay, I love you. That didn't leave with me. I know, she said, so quickly and so sure that my breath left my body like a bird that had been waiting too long to be let out. We set a time that was not tomorrow, not today. Saturday, a day with nothing attached to it except itself. After we hung up, I looked at the phone like it was a creature that had learned new tricks. Then I turned it face down again and sat very still while something recalibrated inside me. Not a clock, a compass. I slept without dreams. Or if I dreamed, they took pity and slipped out before I woke. In the morning, the city smelled like a laundromat. That clean, chemical promise. I walked to the park because that's where I've been putting my thoughts lately, on benches, into trees, across the water to see if they'd come back changed. She didn't just kick me out of her house. She pushed me out of the prison I'd built and decorated and called devotion. Isn't that the trick? You can call a cell almost anything if you hang the right pictures and fill it with the right reasons. I had made my daughter the warden of my worth. I had given her a ring of keys and then grown bitter that she jingled them when I wanted quiet. I sat and wrote, "Love without dignity is hunger. Dignity without love is thirst." Then I crossed it out because it sounded like something on a greeting card for people who apologize in emojis. I wrote instead, "I will not be the piece of furniture that begs to be dusted." I underlined it twice. Bernice approached, holding 2 mugs of something that steamed like a small factory. "Don't get excited. It's tea," she said. "My doctor and I feuding with coffee." "Thank you," I said. I took a sip. It was the color of old pennies and tasted like good advice, unpleasant but necessary. "You got your face rearranged," she said. "How so?" "It's less arranged around a door, more around a window." "My daughter called," I told her. "See?" she said. "Windows." She watched the water a moment. "You going to make her pay?" "For what? For being human?" she said. "We're all guilty there." "No," I said, surprising myself with the certainty. "I'm going to listen." "Good," she said. "Listening is the nearest thing to praying that doesn't require pews." I looked at her. "You should write a book." "I do," she said. "On Tupperware lids. They keep better." I laughed. We sipped. 2 old people in a city that forgets we built its bridges, deciding not to sharpen our knives for once. Back at the room, I pulled Nora's card from the dresser and turned it over. On the back, in neat handwriting that surprised me. Why? She'd written, "Kitchens are for remaking. Call if you want company while you shop." I hadn't noticed that before. Maybe it hadn't been there. Maybe it had and I needed a different face to read it. I didn't call. Not yet. But I placed the card inside the notebook, like a bookmark for a chapter 1 intended to read soon. Saturday arrived without fanfare, which is how most important days come. No trumpets, just the clock behaving as usual. I wore the collared shirt I had ironed poorly and decided not to fight its rebellion. I brought nothing with, no gifts, no casseroles, no boxes labeled sorry with ribbons of self. I took the bus as a penance I didn't fully believe in and got off a block early to let my feet do the last part. The azaleas were blooming like they hadn't heard what was said on this porch 2 weeks ago. The door opened before I knocked. My grandson barreled into me with the serious business of small boys. "Pop!" he yelled. My knees did something unwise. I caught him. I inhaled his hair and smelled playground and shampoo and the particular holiness of children who can forgive freely because they haven't learned the cost yet. Lucy stood in the doorway. Her face was naked. No makeup, no armor. "Dad," she said. "Come in." I did. The living room was the same and not. The lamp hummed. The glass coasters glinted. but the air had a new temperature. We sat. The boy arranged his cape and performed falling poorly on purpose, which is a skill even adults need. I was wrong, she said, without preamble, which is her mother's style. I was unkind. You were scared, I said. She nodded. We were. We're stressed. Money's tight. Giles' job is, I held up a hand. I don't need the reasons to forgive you, but I need to say them, she said. Not for your forgiveness, for mine. She told me the small things that add up to panic. The daycare bill that had ballooned. The car that had decided to dramatize. The way I hover? Yes. And how hovering feels, some days, like an audit of her competence. I hate that you make me feel like a child when I'm a mother, she said, then flinched. That wasn't fair. It was true, I said. Truth and fairness rarely hold hands. We breathed. We let the boy jump into our laps and out again. We let the house settle. Her husband Joel came in from the yard with dirt on his palms and apology in his eyes. Richard, he said, I'm sorry. Me too, I said, and far from cheapening it, the chorus deepened it. We agreed on boundaries, though we didn't use the word because it sounds like tape on a floor. We called it a schedule. Sundays for lunch, if invited. Texts before dropping by. Requests asked plainly, not smuggled into suggestions. And, I added, I will stop tidying your kitchen like a man paying rent with a sponge. She laughed then, for real. Thank you, she said. Honestly, that's the one that makes me the craziest. We ate sandwiches. The bread was seeded and uncooperative. The boy got mustard on everything he loved. The afternoon slid into the kind of light that makes even disagreements look like a phase the room passed through. Before I left, she walked me to the porch. I don't want you to think I don't need you, she said. I want you to know you don't, I answered. Her face tightened, then understood. You're right, she said. I don't, but I want you. There it was. The difference. Need is a handcuff, polished and sentimental. Want is a handheld, firm and warm. Which would you prefer? Be honest. I walked back to the bus stop lighter without being empty. Birds made a mess of a song on a wire. I stood there and let the city be itself and me be myself, and for once, those were not opposite directions. I brought back Bernice's Tupperware on Thursday and met Martha, who disapproved of my shoes and capitalism in equal measure. I liked her instantly. We ate casserole and gossiped about the weather as if we'd personally arranged the humidity. At the end, Bernice pressed a container into my hands again. You're a returner, she said. I trust returners. Theo texted. Playing Thursday if you want to remember how to breathe. I went. Nora was there, arguing with a man about square footage as if it measured happiness. After, she asked me if I'd found a new kitchen. I found a new way to stand in one, I said. She smiled. That's rarer than granite. I called my brother and apologized for letting years stack up like junk mail. He said, me too, and we agreed to talk again before our obituaries introduced us to each other's grandchildren. The azaleas kept blooming. It rained hard, and they bent but did not break, and I thought, flowers know more about dignity than we do. Grace was right. They rot where they are loved, and that is not a tragedy. That is the completion of a sentence. On a Sunday, Lucy and I cooked in a kitchen together like we used to, but differently, shoulder to shoulder, not teacher and student. Joel showed me the sprinkler system, not because he needed me to fix it, but because he wanted to share. The boy made a cape out of a dish towel again, and I showed him how to tie it so he could untie it himself. At the door, when I left, Lucy said, Dad, with that tone mothers reserve for children and occasionally fathers too. Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting me go, I said. She stood very still. I was cruel, she said. That sentence. It wasn't the first of the sentence, I said. Just a comma we needed. That's generous, she said. I am practicing. When I reached the sidewalk, I turned not to look back like a beggar, but to look forward like a man confirming the coordinates. The house sat square and bright. The azaleas leaned, heavy with life. I put my hands in my pockets and found nothing I didn't need and everything I did. The city breathed. I did too. If you're listening, and I think you are, why else would you come this far with me? Let me end with what I know now and should have known earlier. You can love a person so hard you make them a mirror for your worth. Don't. Mirrors crack. People do too. Better to love like a window, something to see through together. With weather, with seasons, with the knowledge that what's beyond it is just as real and won't disappear if you step away. I am Richard, not only father, not only husband once. A man who can make an onion obey, who can laugh at a bar, who can carry a Tupperware and return it, who can be wanted without being needed, who can be forgiven without collecting interest. That is not a tidy happiness, but it is a justice I can live with. And when the day ends and the refrigerator sings its small, stubborn song, I hum along not because it's beautiful, but because it's mine. Thank you. Thank you for staying with me, for listening this far. Your attention is a rare and precious gift. These minutes you've spent here mean the world. And if this story meant something to you, if it touched you in some way, and you feel it might stay with you, then please do this for me. Follow the channel. Every follow, every subscription is more than a number. It's a silent pact. It's the fuel that allows me to keep bringing you stories that have depth, that have truth, that linger. Because in the end, it's stories that connect us. And I want to keep building this journey with you. Until next time.